Hey guys, thanks for purchasing my conversion kit and welcome to the assembly video. If you guys need some help disassembling your old fans, please check the description below where you can find a link to the disassembly video. Okay, so for a quick overview of what we have here in front of us, on the right hand side here, I've got all my new parts that you guys are going to receive depending on the version that you elect to go with. So everyone's going to receive a bag of hardware as well as a couple small bags of, or small packets of heatsink compound. Here's our new center body. We've got our Collet hub, rotor hub. We have our Collet shaft, and then we've got our heatsink as well, which in this case I've already gone ahead and installed the screws on there. Here's my CNC spinner. Now I'm gonna have an option for all of you to order to be able to order both with or without the CNC spinner. So please make sure that you're looking at the description of the auction before you hit buy, because it will tell you exactly what's included with the sale. On the left-hand side here, we've got some of the old parts that will come from your from the fan that you already own. I've got some hardware here for our short stators. We will need a total of 6 short stators for the assembly here. We've got our long stators. We have our 2 mounting tabs. I've got all of my rotor blades here sitting in the shroud. Obviously, here's our old shroud, and we're also going to need the old rotor cap, which should come off of your old fan. And then finally, I've got the motor that I'm going to be using for this build. This happens to be a Typhoon 868 685 kV motor. This is the most commonly used motor on the Dynamax for a 12S setup. It's rock solid and highly recommended. The cost for that motor is about 135 bucks right now. That's the cheapest I've seen at fanjetsusa.com, plus shipping as well. So if you guys are looking for that motor, that's where I would recommend. Moving right on along here, the first step of the assembly process is to get the non-moving parts together. That will consist of the center body, a couple of long stator screws that are going to be part of the hardware that you all receive, our 6 short stators, 2 long stators, our mounting tabs, and then the 6 screws needed to mount our short stators. Once again, these parts are going to come off of your old fan. If you guys end up stripping these or damaging them, you'll have to order some new ones, which can be done directly from JMP, as they are still produced. Okay, so the first thing that I like to do here is identify the front of the fan, which is going to be this side, which is going to have a raised edge, raised lip here, as well as a slightly beveled front edge. Really important so that we don't end up putting the center body in there backwards. Next, we're going to take our center body. This is the front of the center body, and the alignment should look like so. We'll take one of our long stators, holding it with our hand, attempt to carefully mount this in place. We'll take one of our tabs. Now decide which side is going to be facing up, because we'll have to make sure that the other side matches it. Next, take the long stator screw and just feed it through the mounting tab, the shroud, and then all the way through the long stator. This can be a little bit tricky, so just take your time. Once we assemble one side, the other side will be easier. So for this, I like to use a screwdriver with a 7/64 bit on there, and we'll just go ahead and tighten this guy down. Please make sure that we do not over tighten these screws, because this piece is aluminum and we do not want to strip it. Okay, looks like this over rotated just a little bit. We'll go ahead and line it up. Next, we're going to take the long stator for the other side, feed it through, which should be a little bit easier than the first one. There it is. We'll go ahead and make sure it lines up. Now, take note of the direction that you guys want the tab to be mounted here. So in this case, the proper orientation would be like so. We'll take the long stator screw here. Might have to fiddle a little bit with the long stator. And if that causes too many problems, just go ahead and pull the tab off, feed the screw through, and then we can start tightening it down. So it looks like in this case, it's just sticking a little bit. Okay, we'll go ahead and tighten this guy down. Once again, do not over tighten this because we do not want to strip the aluminum center body. Okay, next we'll go ahead and feed our 6 short stators through. Okay, once they're all through, I like to use a drill just to make this process a little faster with a properly sized Phillips bit in there.
Okay. Do not over tighten these screws either.
Okay, and the last thing we'll do is tighten down our long stator screws. And now we'll just make sure that everything looks like it's properly aligned, which it is. All right, guys, step number 2 will be to assemble our rotor. Parts we're gonna need, obviously, are our blades, rotor cap, our rotor hub, and 3 M3 screws, which are part of the included hardware with the kit. The way I like to do this is to have my cap sitting nice and steady on a flat surface, and then from there we'll just go ahead and start pressing these blades into place. Now, your old fan with the old blades should be pretty easy to put back on there after the disassembly, because they're kind of broken in and probably looser fitting than brand new blades. But if you guys are buying brand new blades, this process might be just a little bit difficult. One thing we can do to help it along is use a rubber mallet, and then as we attempt to place these blades on our cap, if they're giving you trouble, just give them a gentle tap with that mallet, rubber mallet, and that should be able to seat these blades on the rotor cap. So once all the blades are on there, we just want to make sure that they're nice and even here on the front edge, which it appears that these are. This very small amount of lip here should be even all the way around the fan, and it's pretty easy to judge just by looking at it. Okay, once that's together. All right, so with that out of the way, next we're going to go ahead and continue assembling this. Please note that these holes need to line up with the holes in the rotor cap for us to properly put this together. So the best way to do it is to simply eyeball it, and once it's in place, so we can see it's not fully seated yet, but once it looks like everything's lining up, we'll go ahead and just squeeze this together the best we can with our hand. And for the rest of it, I like to use a press to seat this in there completely. However, some other options that you guys have, probably one of the easiest would be to take a large C-clamp and basically just put some force on this side as well as on this side and clamp this together. And another option is to put this in a vise and clamp it together in the vise. Just don't overdo it because we don't want to damage our plastic blades. Do not use the M3 screws to tighten or to pull the the rotor hub and the rotor cap together. These things will strip easily, and if that happens, that's going to cause a lot of problems that you guys probably don't want to deal with. So I'm going to go ahead and get this done, and once I press it all together, I'll be back with the final product. Okay, so I've gone ahead and used a vise to put my rotor hub and the rotor cap together, and I know I've done it correctly because the gap in between our rotor cap and the rotor hub here is about equal on all sides. And if we look here at the back, the rotor hub appears to be sitting relatively flush with just a very small lip that's showing. Okay, next we'll just go ahead and tighten down our 3mm screws here, one at a time, and do not over tighten, do not over strip, and do not strip these. Now these will help to pull the last little bit of that rotor hub and rotor cap together, which is a good thing. Okay, I'm just being very careful to not strip the heads on these. And that looks good, so we can see that there is no longer a gap here, and everything is nicely assembled. So that completes our rotor. All right, guys, the next step here will be to install the motor into our fan. For this, we're going to need the motor, we're going to need the previously assembled shroud and hub, and we're also going to need the 4 screws that are included in the hardware kit. These are the M4 screws, which are going to go into the proper sized hole here into the motor. So as far as orienting the motor in here properly, you guys just need to decide where you want the wires coming out. Whether we want it towards this side of the fan or we want it towards this side of the fan, just kind of depends on how it's going to sit in your airplane. So because I'm not going to be installing this in anything, I'm just going to pick an orientation and go with it.
So I'll go ahead and start threading these screws in there by hand, and once I do that, I can go ahead and tighten them down with a wrench.
Okay, we just want to make sure that they're nice and tight. Don't over tighten them, but good enough to hold the motor in place. Okay, so that pretty much completes the stationary pieces of the fan. Okay, to combine our stationary parts with the moving parts, what we need to do first is take our collet shaft, place it on the motor, seat it as far back as it will go. It's pretty much going to sit up against the bearing, and it will go inside of the center body here. So don't be surprised if you guys see that happen. Also, just a note, this is a older motor, and I had used this with my previous conversion kit, which used set screws, and that's why you guys see the flat spots on the motor. But do not need to do any of that for this setup. You can just take the stock motor as it comes out of the box and put it into place. All right, so we have our collet shaft in there. Next, we'll just take the fully assembled fan, slide it into place. One thing I want to verify right now is that I have a decent amount of clearance all the way around, and none of the blades should be touching the shroud. Now, one thing we can do here to help ourselves out is to loosen and tighten the screws for the short stators as well as for the long stators as required to ensure that the rotor is not touching the shroud at any point. And then finally, to tighten this fan down. Now, if we're gonna use our stock plastic spinner, you guys are gonna have to take note of the small stubs that are molded into the stock spinner, because they will have to accommodate these cutouts in the rotor cap. In my case here, I've gone ahead and sanded them off, which you all can do as well. It's not gonna harm it, and makes the process a little bit more easy. Okay, we'll go ahead and put that into place. I just wanna make sure that this gap around is about as even as I can get it to be. I don't recommend taking a hammer or anything and pushing this into place. And next, we'll just go ahead and tighten down our cap screw here. Okay, once again, this is a M5 screw. And as I tighten this down, my collet is going to grab hold of the motor shaft and prevent the fan from sliding off. And that's pretty much it for the stock spinner assembly. Okay, so we're gonna assemble the fan now with the aluminum CNC spinner. And I just wanted to demonstrate that if you guys ever need to pull your old spinner off and it's giving you some trouble, the best way to go about it is to find a screwdriver here with a small enough, a flathead is what's needed, that we can just kind of squeeze into place here in between the spinner and the fan, and you guys should be able to just pry that off. And just be careful, because again, we don't want to damage our blades. Okay, so the process with the CNC spinner is similar. One thing I wanted to mention that I forgot earlier is that I no longer include a nut that goes into place here, because number one, it adds additional weight, and we really don't need it whether we're using a plastic spinner or a CNC spinner, because your M5 screw is capable of holding this entire setup together without any problem. Tighten it down, and there it is. All right, guys, the next step in the assembly process is going to be the heatsink install. We'll just go through this step by step to make this a easy process, but I think the better way to do it is to pre-mount the heatsink on the motor back a couple of steps where we're installing the motor into the center body. The reason being, one of these screws is going to be all the way up here towards the front of the center body, and that's going to make it slightly challenging to tighten it down, but it can still be done. It's just not the best method. The heatsink itself, you guys will notice there will be some drilled and tapped holes here on the sides, and that is for mounting the tail cones that I sell, and we'll cover that in a upcoming step here. Additionally, I do include a couple small packets of thermal paste, and that will simply go on the inside of the heatsink or on the outside of the motor prior to installing the heatsink. So let's get started. All right, guys, the best way to do this is to go ahead and pre-mount actually all the screws onto the heatsink. I leave them loose enough so that I can open these camshells up as much as possible without the screws falling out, and that'll make it easier to install it on the motor. The thermal paste itself, we'll go ahead and apply it to the inside of our heat sinks, like so. Try to use one packet for each side. Okay, try to put an even coat on the entire surface here. And when we're ready to install it, we'll go ahead and open up the camshell as much as possible. Figure out the alignment before you guys attempt to install it. Then we're just going to slide this into place. You guys will notice that I've got a couple of stators here that are further apart than the rest. And once we have final alignment here, we'll go ahead and start tightening it down. First, I like to tighten the center screws on both sides, then I'll work on the front, and then I'll work on the back. But treat this kind of like you would spokes on a bicycle wheel. We want to just kind of go back and forth and make sure they're all tightened down well. Okay, for the front screw here, I'm going to use an Allen wrench because that's the best way to access it. And before I do that, just to tighten it down as much as I can by hand, I'll just pull out my bit and hand tighten it just to make my job a little bit easier with the Allen wrench. Okay, that should allow me to tighten it down now with the Allen wrench. So I'll do one turn there, one turn on this side, just kind of keep alternating until it's completely tight.
Okay, now that those are somewhat tight, we'll go ahead and get this one. And now we'll go back to the center.
Okay, they are nice and snug. We can see that we have pretty much the same amount of space in between the camshells here on both sides, and that's pretty much it for the heatsink install. All right, guys, we're down to the final step now, which is installing my tail cone here. Just a little bit of history on these tail cones. The reason why I decided to develop this was to find some efficient way of cooling the motor down. The best way to do it is to be able to pull air all the way from the front of it through the motor and then out the back. But the only way to really do that is to create some kind of low pressure here back behind the motor. And the best way to do it is using these tail cones, and thankfully with 3D printing, we have the ability to really make some complex designs and print them for very low cost. So you guys have actually two choices if you guys want to order these tail cones. One, I can just print them for you. The cost is a lot less in that case because I can't give you guys the same kind of quality that a industrial printer can. Or you guys can order these ones off of shapeways.com. As you can see, the material is a little bit different. The quality is a little bit better. They're a little bit smoother, but they both do the same exact job. So we'll continue with our install here of this tail cone. Now on the heat sinks, you guys will notice a couple of tapped and drilled holes on the sides. Those are where the tabs off the tail cones will be mounted. Using some of these screws that'll be included with the kit. So in this case, we're using a couple of 2.5 millimeter screws, but I might be switching over to 3 millimeter for mounting the tail cone as well. They'll be about 3 millimeters in length. That'll be the smallest screw in the kit, so very easy to identify. All right, so when we're ready to go ahead and throw this sucker on there, once again, always think about where you want it oriented, whether we want the neck coming up this way or in the other direction. Kind of goes back to however you guys want it mounted in your jets. figure that out, install it on there, and then we're just going to take our screws and simply tighten it down. Do not over tighten these because there isn't a whole lot of aluminum here for them to bite into, and if you guys over tighten it, it'll probably strip before you know it. Okay, and there it is, all installed and in place, and that is the fully assembled fan here with my kit.